Hey, welcome back to Leading Edge. You know, if you have lived here for any length of time at all and have a pulse, I bet you have heard his voice. He has been informing the people of Toledo in Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan for over half a century. That's what I said, half a century. As someone who's hung around a long time myself, I know that takes some doing. So I am honored to have London Mitchell, renowned radio journalist, joining me here on Leading Edge. Lon, good to see you. I know it's still pretty raw for you, but hey, on the bright side, the morning alarm clock situation has improved, hasn't it? I mean, you were a 4 a.m.er for a lot of years.
A lot of years. But I have to say the best part of it was I never had any regrets about climbing out of the sack and going to work. I just loved the job and being with the Toledo audience. I'm so grateful that so many over the years invited me into their lives to share their mornings with them.
It was. I did morning radio for a time. I did morning TV for a time. You got to say, the first thing was just get out of bed. And once I was up and awake, it was okay. And I got to tell you, the drive to work with no traffic.
That's a plus. That is a plus.
Yeah. London Mitchell, my guest. Lon, let's face it, we would all like to write our own script on how we exit our careers. But for you, corporate powers dictated otherwise, didn't they?
Yeah, the bean counters were in town. And, like so many radio stations now, there isn't what you might call the local ownership.
Yeah.
For example, the company that I work with, Cumulus, I think they own 7 stations in town.
Yeah.
So the decisions really are made at the corporate level.
And 7 stations in town, Lon, and hundreds around the country. These are huge broadcasting conglomerates. So let me pick it up with you there, because you're right. It used to be we had a whole bunch of separate radio owners in our market, as did every market. And then each would need announcers and disc jockeys and news people. But under consolidation, one person can appear on multiple stations, and the need for personnel has declined precipitously. Is consolidation in the industry the biggest change? Of the many changes you've seen, Lon Mitchell, is that the biggest you've witnessed in our business?
Jerry, I think there are 2. One is the consolidation, because as you and I have talked, every radio station made commitments to the FCC about local news coverage.
Right.
So when you had multiple owners, you had multiple news departments, each in competition with each other. And I think that developed into a lot more competition, a lot more of the reporting that is being done. And so we had, I think, an obligation to the listeners, and 2, the listeners got more of an insight as to what the news was all about, or what the big programs were.
Interesting. Yeah, competition. I'll tell you, that will breed success, folks. You're looking at the folks down there. Well, I got to do an extra story. I got to do a better job. And that just elevates us all. Let's rewind, to use a broadcast term. Late 60s, you're part of getting a campus radio station on the air at UT. A colleague suggests you might apply for, I love this story, entry-level job over at WMHE. Now, folks, you may not remember the call letters. It's the old 92.5. So with your Federal Communications Commission license, your FCC license in hand, as we all had to have, you head over to the station. You have it there. Can you replay what happened when you got over there? I'm
sorry about that. Yeah, I think I'm 19 years old, Jerry.
Yep.
And I'm walking into the lobby of 92.5 WMHE. And I've got my 3rd class radio certificate, my license in my hand, a little blue sheet of paper, and I'm clutching it in my hand as I walk into the lobby to apply for a job. The general manager walks out, and he looks at me, and he sees my blue certificate in my hand, and he says, "Can you read?" And I said, "Whoa, wait a minute, can I read?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." I'm very nervous. Like I said, 19 years old.
Yep.
First time I've applied for a job, and being on the radio was just what I always wanted to do. So he returns in a couple of minutes from the back office. I'm still standing in the middle of the lobby, I might add,
Mhm.
and he hands me some old wire copy from the teletype, this orange paper with the purple ink on it. And he says, "Here, read some of this news copy." And I got to believe it was a quivering voice because I'm really nervous. And I read the wire copy and I'm thinking, I've blown it. I've blown my audition. And he says to me, "Can you start tonight?"
That I love that. That's the line, right? Can you start tonight? And you did, and you
I
never
did.
came off.
I did, and it was a almost 53-year run. My voice has been on radio and a little bit of television.
Yeah, absolutely.
all
Well,
that way.
broadcasting, in particularly radio, I think attracts some real personalities. I mean, radio, let's think about it, folks. It's theater of the mind. You hear the voice, you don't see the people. Blandness doesn't jump out at you, personalities do. And like me, Lon Mitchell, you've been blessed to work with some really colorful folks and talented individuals.
Oh yeah, I'd say topping the list might be Bob Kelly. And I was his news. I got to tell you a story about Bob Kelly.
I love
I
it.
first met Bob when I was in high school. My cousin was visiting from England. I took her to the old WTOD studios when they were doing rock and roll music. Bob was the morning disc jockey,
Mhm.
and he invited us into the studio. Was very, very accommodating. Explained how radio worked to my cousin. She was incredibly impressed. And then the newscaster walked in, and it was time to do the news. And he sat in this big overstuffed chair with a microphone hanging in front of his face, and he started the news. And this was a guy named Bob Drake. News beat, and he's doing the news, and he comes to a story about a fire. Bob Kelly leans over the control board with his cigarette lighter and sets the news copy on fire. The newscaster doesn't miss a beat.
Mhm.
As he's reading the stories, he's dropping the papers, his news copy, onto the floor, and he's stomping it
Stomping out the
stomping the
flames.
fire with his foot. I'm thinking to myself, this is a loony profession. You've got to be out of your mind to want to work with Bob Kelly.
Great to have London Mitchell along. I have much more with Lon. We're going to play that for you in 2 weeks. And I will be right back on this week's Leading Edge right after this.